Hey crafty people, it's Tasha. Welcome back to my channel. This is a bit of a different video because I'm not making a card today. Instead, I'm going to make this framed artwork. I've got 4 die sets from Spellbinders, all from the Victorian collection. I've got Victorian Foliage, Southern Magnolia, Camellia, and the Teacup and Saucer. You do need to cut multiples of some of them, but the amount that you need is on the die, which is honestly a massive help. I think that's great. I've never tried to make this kind of 3D flower before, so I did start by making some off screen, but I thought that we could make a Camellia together. Disclaimer, I am no expert at these, so once you've seen this video, if you've fallen head over heels for them like I did, definitely head over to Spellbinder's channel for a full demo. I made this special artwork for a very special person, and honestly, this entire release from Spellbinders made me think of them immediately. I love pouring my heart into a project. It's definitely my love language. Now, on to the flower making. I don't have any of the special paper for these, so I just used what I had, and I die cut all of the layers for the Camellia from red cardstock. I don't know what brand it is, unfortunately. It's just from my stash. It's more than £80 weight, but it's definitely less than 110. I'm adding the darkest shade to the centre of each layer, then I'm going to blend it out with a slightly lighter red. What really takes these up to another level is using the edge of a brush to add some shading where the petal is folding. I use the shape of the petal to guide me and just add some lines going from the edge of the petal towards the centre. You can always add more, but if you go too dark, you can't really take that away, so less is definitely more here. And don't forget to do both sides. Here's a side-by-side of these pieces before and after I've inked them up. I did all of the layers like that, and now we're going to turn them into gorgeous flowers using a couple of inexpensive tools. First of all, this mat. It only cost a few pounds, and it's definitely a lot better than any other foam pad that I've tried before. It's quite high density, so it offers some resistance, which really helps you to achieve that curve. Then you also need some ball tools. Again, these were really cheap. They came in a set with loads of different sizes. Firstly, I want to thin down those edges a bit so that they look a little more natural. So I'm just working the edge with my tool half on the petal, half on the foam. Then I move slightly further into the petal, and you can already see that it starts to add some curve to them. Now, I want to break down that card some more, so I flipped it over and run a single line down the centre of each petal. Flip it back and continue working the petal. I really can't explain my thinking here more than I was just trying to break down that card. Once it's all nicely rubbed down, I start to use more of a circle motion, which really lets that petal form a nice cup. If I'd just started with this motion without breaking down the card, it wouldn't look nearly as natural because you'd be fighting against the nature of the paper. I'm really hoping that that makes sense. Once they're all done, I use a pair of needle nose tweezers to bend the petal in from the centre line. Then I'm going to take hold of the very edge of the petal in those tweezers and curl it back on itself. This step is truly what brings life to them. Make sure you change how and where you bend each one, and I can't get over how awesome they're starting to look. This was where I got really excited. It's the second Camellia I made, and I think it's definitely an improvement on the first. The last step is to curve the petals up by circling in the centre. Look at that for a comparison. Just repeat that for all of the larger layers. I'm not going to show you the same bits over and again because I'm not going to lie, it took a long while, but I really think it's worth it for something so special. I'm going to twist the smaller petals in even more to add a natural shape to the centre of my finished flower. There isn't a centerpiece to this one, so I wanted to make sure that the flower looked full all the way into the middle so that you don't get left with like just a bare empty space. So now I have all of my layers, I'll start to build the flower itself. You want to use a really strong liquid glue because you're only going to use it right in the middle of the bloom, but we want to be sure there's no way it will fall apart once it's on display. I do like to use something to press down whilst that glue takes hold to get the best contact for each layer before moving on to the rest. I also assembled it into 2 pieces and then adhered those together. I'm not entirely sure why, other than it felt like the right way to do it. Use the same tools to add veins and curls to your leaves too, and then I pinched the end. I actually went back in with a touch of glue to keep that pinched bit in place. These little flowers were from a completely different set. I just added a bit of ink and then simply pushed them down in the centre onto that foam pad to get a nice cupped look. I went back in and added little gems into the centre of these. For that natural glossy shine on my leaves, I'm just painting them with some Nuvo crystal glaze. Any brand of this type of product would work, but I'd run out of glossy accents, so I used this one instead. A thin layer painted on gives the perfect amount of natural shine, and it dries really quickly too. I wanted to have lots of different foliage to choose from when it came to making my arrangement. On to the background. This is an 8x8 piece of distress watercolour cardstock. I'm going to add some quick colour and shine with some sprays. Again, there's loads of brands for this stuff, but these are just some that I had in my stash. I do want to keep the spray somewhat contained, so I'm going to be spraying into my DIY splat box, aka an old shoebox. Layering up for more interest, but I want to make sure that each layer is dry before moving on to the next, or I might lose some of that texture. To add some pops of gold, I'm going to spritz this dried panel with water and then sprinkle over some polished gold from Wow. It takes a little longer to heat, but you can totally emboss with water. For my sentiment, I stacked up 4 layers of white with a layer of gold on top to give me some really dimensional letters. But I was stressing about getting them on the piece straight, so I trimmed thin strips of heavyweight acetate. I taped these down onto my glass mat so I knew that they'd be straight. Then I glued each letter in place on that. I just used a different strip for each word, and now I can easily move them around to choose where on the piece I want to put them. You don't see the acetate at all once it's all secured down, especially when it's in the frame behind the glass. I made a teacup and saucer using some pattern paper that reminded me of old Wedgwood pottery because that's local to where I'm from. I positioned the flowers and all of the various leaves around this teacup and adhered them down with some strong liquid adhesive. Again, holding down to make sure there is good contact. I also matted my panel onto a 10x10 piece of brushed metallic cardstock, which I'd glued directly onto the back of the frame. And as an aside, that yellow tape was just there to make sure that I adhered everything the right way, because that's where the hook for hanging it was. Didn't want to lose which way was the top. For a last bit of detail, I added more glaze onto the tea inside the cup. I framed the whole piece to give it as a gift. All of the supplies that I used are linked below, but don't forget to check out my blog post for a visual list, where you'll also see additional photos of the entire piece. I really hope that you like it. I know my recipient did, and I've been waiting to post this until after I'd given it to her. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and if you'd give these kind of 3D Papercraft flowers a go. If you don't already, please consider hitting that subscribe button and check the bell to be notified whenever I post. Have a lovely, happy, safe and wonderful week. Stay crafty. Bye.